I always admired my older brother, believing he was the strongest, most dependable person in the family. But when he left me alone to face the consequences of something we both did, and pretended he had nothing to do with it, I realized I had spent my idolizing someone who never deserved it. I another woman last night, and my wife of 6 years still doesn't know. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I did it because my older brother Danny convinced me it was what real men do, and now I'm sitting here at 3 am realizing that the person I've looked to my entire is a coward who's about to let me alone. It started 3 months ago at Danny's bachelor party. Not his first marriage, mind, his third. The guy collects wives like bell cards and somehow convinced me that made him an expert on relationships. While I was nursing my second and calling Sarah to check in, Danny grabbed my phone and hung. Jesus Christ, Mike. Or 32, not 12. Stop acting like a scared little boy. The other guys laughed. These were Danny's friends, not mine. Guys who talked about their wives like they were inconveniences. Guys who high-fived when someone mentioned a close call with a coworker. I should have left right then. Instead I stayed, because Danny was my big brother. The guy who taught me to ride a bike. Who scared away bullies in middle school. Who I called when dad had his heart. In my mind he was still the hero who could do no wrong. Sarah's got whipped, little brother. When's the last time felt alive? When's the last time did something just because wanted to? The club was Danny's idea. The shots were Danny's idea. The private room was Danny's idea. But when that dancer with the dark eyes started paying attention to me specifically, when she started asking about my marriage like she cared, when she suggested we meet sometime just to talk, I didn't blame Danny anymore. I blamed Sarah. Sarah, who worked 60-hour weeks as a nurse during while I worked from home. Sarah, who never complained when I spent entire weekends playing video games with Danny. Sarah, who still left little notes in my lunchbox even after 6 years of marriage. Sarah, who deserved so much better than the thoughts I was having about a stranger who smelled like vanilla perfume and bad decisions. But Danny kept whispering in my ear. Settled too young, Mike. Look at me. I've been married 3 times because I know what I'm worth. Married the first girl who said yes. That wasn't even true. Sarah wasn't the first. She was the best. But sitting there in that red, lit room with Danny nodding his approval, I started believing his lies. One night out won't anyone. What Sarah doesn't know won't her. Think she's never looked at another man. Come on, Mike. Level little. The dancer's name was. Of course it was. She gave me her real number, which should have been red flag number 1000. But I was on more than. I was on Danny's approval. On feeling chosen. On the fantasy that I was more than just Sarah's reliable husband who fixed the sink and remembered to buy milk. Texted me the next day. Just a simple, had fun talking last night. I stared at that message for 3 hours before responding. Me too. Danny called that afternoon laughing. My little brother's finally growing. Just don't get caught and don't get attached. Rule number 1 of being a man. For 3 months I lived a double secret texts. Lunch meetings that turned into stolen kisses in parking lots. Elaborate lies about working late. I deleted messages. I started showering as soon as I got home. I became a stranger to my own wife. And through it all, Danny cheered me on. Covered for me when Sarah asked questions. High-fived me like I was winning some kind of game instead of destroying everything I'd ever claimed to law. This is good for marriage, he'd say. We'll appreciate Sarah more when realize what else is out there. Last night, and I met at a hotel. Not to sleep together, just to talk, we said. Just to see where things were going. But talking turned into touching. Touching turned into kissing. Kissing turned into the moment I realized I wasn't the man I thought I was. I pulled away. Told her I couldn't. Told her I loved my wife. Laughed like she'd heard it all before. Brother said get cold feet eventually. Said we're too much of a Boy Scout to go through with anything real. Nah, I went cold. No him. Honey, I've been sleeping with Danny for 6 months. This whole thing was his idea. He said it would be funny to see how far his innocent little brother would go. The room started spinning. Danny had played me. Set me. Used me as entertainment while he was cheating on his own fiancée. And I'd been so desperate for his approval that I'd lit my marriage on fire just to make him proud. I drove home in a daze. Sarah was asleep on the couch, still in her scrubs from a 12-hour shift. There was dinner waiting for me in the microwave. A note that said, long day but thinking of love. I stood there looking at her, and all I could think about was how Danny had turned me into exactly the kind of man I'd always despised. The kind who betrays the person who loves them most. The kind who blames everyone except the person in the mirror. But I still thought he'd have my back when everything fell apart. I was wrong about that too. Sarah found out this morning and Danny's nowhere to be found. Turns out my big brother, my hero, my role model, is exactly the kind of man who runs when the consequences show. It wasn't even who told her. It was Danny's fiancée Rebecca, apparently got tired of being a secret and decided to everyone's lives at once. She sent Rebecca screenshots of everything, every text, every plan, every detail of how Danny had orchestrated the whole thing like some sick puppet master. Rebecca called Sarah at 6 a.m. I was in the shower when the phone rang, still trying to figure out how to confess what I'd done, still hoping I could somehow minimize the damage. I came downstairs to find Sarah sitting at our kitchen table with her laptop open, reading messages that destroyed our marriage one screenshot at a time. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before, empty, like the person she'd loved for 8 years had just evaporated. 6 months, Mike. I've been lying to my face for 6 months. I tried to explain. Tried to tell her about Danny's manipulation, about how confused I'd been, about how I'd never actually slept with anyone. But every word that came out of my mouth sounded like exactly what it was. Excuses. Pathetic, desperate excuses from a man who traded his integrity for his brother's approval. So this is Danny's fault. Danny made delete messages. Danny made shower the second got home. Danny made lie about working late while we're kissing another woman. She was right. Danny might have set the trap, but I'd walked into it willingly. I'd made every single choice that led to this moment. I'd destroyed everything we'd built together because I wanted to feel special. Sarah, please. I know I messed, but we can work through this. I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy. I'll Danny out of my completely. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Danny out. Mike, Danny's already out. I called him an hour ago. My stomach dropped. What did he say? He said he had no idea what I was talking about. Said been acting strange lately but he couldn't imagine cheating. Said maybe I should look at what I'd been doing wrong to drive away. The betrayal hit me like a physical. Danny wasn't just running from the consequences, he was actively throwing me under the bus. Pretending he'd had nothing to do with it, making it sound like I was some kind of predator who'd gone off the rails without any outside influence. But Rebecca has the texts. She knows he was involved. Rebecca broke with him this morning. And according to her, Danny's already claiming that forced him to keep secret, that he was scared of what might do if he told me. I couldn't breathe. 29 years of looking to this man. 29 years of thinking he was the strongest, most loyal person I knew. And when I needed him most, he was rewriting history to save his own skin. Sarah stood from the table. I'm gonna stay at my sister's for a while. I need to figure out if there's anything left of the man I married underneath all these lies. She started walking toward the stairs, then stopped. Know what the worst part is, Mike? It's not even the cheating. It's that destroyed us for someone who doesn't give about. Away 8 years for a brother who just proved he never deserved loyalty. She was gone within an hour. Packed a bag while I sat on our couch, trying to process the fact that the two people I'd relied on most in my were both gone. One because I'd betrayed her. One because he'd betrayed me. I called Danny 17 times, went straight to voicemail every time. Finally drove to his apartment. His car was there, but he wouldn't answer the door. I could hear him inside, talking to someone on the phone, probably spinning more lies about how his crazy little brother had lost his mind. I sat in my car outside his building for 3 hours, hoping he'd come out, hoping we could talk face to face, hoping there was some explanation that would make sense of how my hero had turned into my destroyer. He never came out, but his neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on my window around noon. Or Mike, right? Danny's brother. I nodded. He asked me to give this if I saw it. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note that made my bowl. Mike, I'm sorry things got out of hand. We both made mistakes here. And I can't let poor choices destroy my future with Rebecca. I hope this money helps get back on feet. Maybe it's time we both grew and took responsibility for our own actions. He was buying me off, like I was some kind of problem to be solved with cash. Like 6 months of manipulation and a lifetime of lies could be fixed with a check and a lecture about taking responsibility. The same brother who'd covered for me when I broke mom's favorite vase at age 7, who'd lied to our parents about where I was when I snuck out to parties in high school, who'd been my best man at my wedding, promising in his speech to always have my back no matter what. All of it had been performance. All of it had been conditional. The second things got messy, the second his own reputation was on the line, I became expendable. I tore the check and left the pieces on his doorstep. But the damage was done. Sarah was gone, Danny was gone. And I was sitting alone in a house that used to be full of love, realizing that I'd destroyed my marriage for someone who never actually cared about me at all. The man I'd spent my whole trying to impress had just taught me the most brutal lesson of all: heroes are just people haven't seen clearly yet. It's been 6 weeks since my imploded, and I finally understand what rock bottom looks like. It looks like eating cereal for dinner, because can't remember the last time went grocery shopping. It looks like mother crying on the phone, because her 2 sons have managed to destroy their entire family in the span of a month. It looks like realizing that the person thought were never actually existed. Sarah filed for divorce last Monday. No surprise there. What did surprise me was how relieved I felt when the papers arrived. Not because I wanted our marriage to end, but because living with the weight of what I'd done was slowly me. At least now we could both stop pretending there was anything left to save. She came by yesterday to get the rest of her things. I thought maybe we could talk. Maybe I could finally explain how sorry I was, how completely I understood what I'd thrown away. Instead she looked right through me like I was furniture. The Sarah knew died the morning she found out who really are. She said, loading books into a box. I'm not angry anymore, Mike. I'm just sad that I 8 years loving someone who never actually existed. That hit harder than any screaming match would have. Anger would have meant she still felt something. This cold indifference was proof that I'd killed whatever we'd had together. There was no coming back from this, no working through it. No second chances for men who trade their souls for their brother's approval. She took her engagement ring off and set it on the kitchen counter. I hope someday figure out why needed Danny's validation more than needed my love. Because until understand that, we're gonna keep destroying everything good and point. After she left, I sat in our empty bedroom and tried to remember the last time I'd made a decision without thinking about what Danny would say. I couldn't. Every major choice in my head had been filtered through what my big brother would think, what college to attend, what job to take. Even proposing to Sarah had been delayed for months because Danny said I was too young to settle down. I'd spent 32 years of my life as a supporting character in someone else's story, and when I finally tried to step into the spotlight, I discovered I had no idea who I actually was underneath all that desperate need for approval. Mom called this morning. First time we've spoken since everything came out. Apparently, Danny's been telling everyone that I had some kind of mental breakdown, that I started cheating because I couldn't handle the pressure of being married, that he tried to help me but I was too far gone to listen to reason. Brother's worried about Mike. He says been calling and showing at his apartment making accusations that don't make sense. Even our own mother believed his version. Why wouldn't she? Danny had always been the golden child, the successful one, the one who could talk his way out of anything. I was just the younger brother who'd always been a little too eager to please, a little too willing to follow instead of lead. Mom, did Danny tell about how he set the whole thing? Silence on the other end of the line. Then, Michael, I think need professional help. This obsession with blaming brother for choices isn't healthy. She hung before I could explain. Not that it would have mattered. Danny had already poisoned the well. Turned himself into the victim and me into the unstable little brother who couldn't take responsibility for his own actions. That's when I realized the full scope of what he'd done. It wasn't just about covering his tracks with Rebecca. It wasn't just about protecting his reputation. He'd systematically erased his own involvement while making sure everyone knew I was the problem. The dangerous one, the one who couldn't be trusted. I drove to his apartment complex one last time. Not to confront him, just to see if I could catch a glimpse of the man I'd worshipped my entire. To understand how someone could be so calculating, so cruel to the person who'd loved him most unconditionally. I saw him loading boxes into a moving truck, running away again. Starting fresh somewhere new where nobody knew about his latest mess. Rebecca was nowhere to be seen, which meant he'd probably already found wife number 4. He saw me sitting in my car and walked over. For a second, I thought maybe he'd finally tell the truth. Maybe the brother I remembered was still in there somewhere. Mike looked like. Maybe should talk to someone. All this anger isn't good for. He said it loud enough for the other tenants to hear. Performed concern like he'd performed everything else. Made sure anyone watching would think he was the caring big brother trying to help his troubled sibling. Where are moving to? I asked. Fresh start? No. Sometimes that's what requires. He looked me down like I was something pitiful. Should try it sometime. Stop living in the past. Stop blaming other people for mistakes. He walked away then, and I sat there watching the man who'd shaped my entire worldview load us into a truck like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't orchestrated the destruction of my marriage for entertainment. Like he hadn't spent months convincing me that infidelity was just part of being a man. The moving truck pulled away and I realized I was finally free. Free from constantly seeking his approval. Free from trying to live to an image that had never been real. Free from the exhausting work of loving someone who'd never actually loved me back. But freedom at 32 feels different than it would have at 22. I'm not starting fresh. I'm starting over from wreckage. Sarah's gone. My family believes I'm unstable. My friends don't know what to think. I'm alone in a way I've never been before, and it's entirely my fault. The worst part isn't the loneliness though. The worst part is understanding that I destroyed the best thing in my for someone who was never worth destroying anything for. I traded a woman who loved me unconditionally for a brother whose love came with conditions I never even knew existed. Sarah was right. The Mike she married never actually existed. He was just a projection of what I thought Danny wanted me to be. Now I get to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for an audience that was never really watching. Maybe that's the real punishment. Not losing Sarah, though that's agony. Not losing my family's respect, though that cuts deep. The real punishment is finally seeing clearly after 32 years of willful blindness, and realizing that the person I spent my trying to impress was never worth the effort. I'm writing this at 2 a.m. in a house that echoes with everything I've lost, and I want anyone reading this to understand something: when betray someone who loves for someone who doesn't, don't just lose them both. Lose two. And sometimes, that's exactly what deserve.